shirt over it.
I was wondering if you guys are going to show up in some sort of a costume.
Okay. Hey, if I click on the thing, will it click, or do I have to actually put there? I think you can just put the...
All right, guys, thank you for your patience. Our technical issues are resolved. Welcome to the Calgary Expo. You guys enjoying the final day of the Expo? I'm sorry, that did not sound like a crowd that is enjoying the final day of the Expo. Are you enjoying the final day of the Expo? So much better, so much better. All right, guys, just some quick housekeeping rules, okay? No flash photography. Still photography is fine, just turn off your flashes. And video recording is also fine with the panel, so that's okay. If you have a cell phone in your pocket, please make sure it is turned to silent or it is turned off. If it goes off in the middle of this presentation, I will summon the Kraken, okay? Also, on your way out the door, we have some attendee survey forms, so you can give us some feedback on how awesome this panel is. And every one you fill out and return in to somebody wearing a shirt just like mine here, you get entered into a draw to win tickets to next year's Expo, okay? So sit back, enjoy, and I turn you over to the very capable hands of our presenters. Thank you, guys.
Hi, everybody. So welcome. Thanks so much for coming. We're here to talk Ender's Game. So there's three of us here on the panel today. Just to let you know, this panel is part of like a kind of larger program of more academic-focused panels, in which we kind of investigate pop culture texts. So we've got a great variety of presentations today. So first up is Jessica Bay. She's from the University of Lethbridge, and her presentation is entitled "What Kind of Hero is Ender?" Then I'll do my bit. My name's Angie. I'm from the University of Calgary, and I'll be looking at can a text be divorced from its author? So that one will be quite salacious. And to my right here, we've got Dr. Delia Dimitrica. Oh, sorry. And her panel will be on, or her presentation will be on Ender's Power.
Okay, so I'm going to start, and as Angie said, I'm Jessica, and so I'm going to talk about both the book and the movie, and I'm sorry there are tons of spoilers in my presentation, so I really hope you've seen it or read it. Sorry. And so I'm going to give you a really quick rundown on some literary theory. I know that sounds really boring, but it'll get better, trust me. Okay, so in his romance mythos, Northrop Frye, so this is the literary theory bit, suggests that the hero is born, encounters a false father figure, enters a magical world with faithful companions, and a relationship of chaste love. He then goes on a quest that involves a perilous journey with minor adventures leading to a crucial struggle, that's the big boss battle, and followed by praise for the triumphant hero. So Frye's heroes are often described in terms of their divinity, if not actually referred to as God. The antagonist of such a plot, as the hero's enemy, is inundated with demonic qualities. This dichotomy of good and evil is reflected through the majority of the characters in such a story. So we see this in things like The Lord of the Rings, for example. You have that journey, Frodo has to get to Mordor and get rid of the ring, all that stuff. So that's Frye's hero romance mythos. So do Ender and his tale embody this role and this mythos? Well, Ender begins his tale with a birth of sorts. The removal of his monitor represents the beginning of his new life. In the movie, this actually includes blood and other fluids as well. Shortly after this, Ender meets a man he believes will be kind to him. This is Colonel Graff. Preparing for the launch that will take him at 6 years old in the book to battle school, Ender thinks that he felt comfortable with Graff. Graff was good, and he was principal of the battle school. Ender relaxed a little. He would have a friend there. But this isn't so true. Colonel Graff works hard to isolate Ender from the other students. Even before docking at battle school, Graff has already shown that he will not be the friend and father figure Ender is hoping for. Okay, that's where we are. Battle school can represent a magical world for Ender, so this is where he learns everything he needs to know. The battle room in particular could qualify. In this room, Ender learns to change the way he thinks about everything. He discovers that up and down are not constant, and as such, he must adjust his thinking about the entire world. We get that whole repeated, the enemy's gate is down thing, right? It's not what we normally think. Here, during what could pass as his childhood, Ender meets the friends who will continue on with him and support him in his later journey. He also has a version of chaste love here with his early relationship with Eli and later with Petra, and of course his love for his sister Valentine qualifies. It's that love that has propelled him to the stars, and it is that love that sends him back when he worries that he's lost his humanity. Ender's quest pits him against many minor foes as he fights other students in his launch group, his commanding officer Bonzo, other commanders during battles, and finally the teachers at the school once he comes to realize that they are and have been his enemy all along. Ultimately, Ender must fight both the buggers and himself in order to complete his own quest narrative. During this time, Ender is seen by the teachers as the one who will save them. Dink tells Bonzo, this is again in the book, not to hurt Ender because he's the best. He asks who else can fight the buggers. At this point in the novel, Ender has become a leader and a legend to the other students. At one point, he realizes that he has the respect of everyone and he's treated with deference. Even the teachers were respectful. Other than battling his inner Peter or demon, Ender must finally fight the Formics or the buggers. This extraterrestrial race has been so vilified that any time Ender even begins to question their motives, he's immediately shot down and reminded that whatever else they might be or do, they have killed humans and are therefore a threat. From that basic introduction, which is not where I am, there we go. From that basic introduction, we can see that Ender absolutely fits Fry's mold for a hero. He has the characteristics and has experienced the same kind of journey. There are, however, a couple of problems with that classification. First of all, the dichotomy of good and evil is only present from the perspective of others. Ender constantly questions his actions. Ultimately, he follows through, but he really lives in this gray area in his own mind. He doesn't feel that he's always on the side of good at all. Both the film and the book depict Ender's collapse after discovering that he has, while playing a game, wiped out the race he was only beginning to understand and therefore love. The image of Ender as Fry's or anyone's really archetypal hero is also problematized by his age. This is actually a very big obstacle to the enjoyment of the book for many readers. Ender can't be a traditional hero because he can never grow up. However, he's a child only in age. While discussing the structure of command, Dink tells Ender that they're not children. Children can lose sometimes and nobody cares. Children aren't in armies, they aren't commanders, they don't rule over 40 other kids. But this is what Ender actually does do. Ender's childhood is so far removed from the one that Dink goes on to describe that he can't even begin to understand. He's never played games in which the outcome didn't matter. He's never actually played at all. So Ender must be a new kind of hero, a child hero who is allowed to make adult decisions that impact the world of adults while relying on his inexperience and childlike nature to breed innovation. In fact, we can see similar heroes in Ender's successors. Successors in terms of the novel, obviously. Harry Potter and Percy Jackson, for example, these characters both affect the world of adults while relying on their childlike inexperience to protect them. Unlike Ender, however, these characters bumble from one challenge to another with the help of friends whose skill sets complement their own until they ultimately save the day. Ender, on the other hand, embodies all of the skill sets he needs to save the day and is presented as the only hero possible. The only thing he lacks is true friendship, and he begins his journey at again, this is the age of 6 thing, is such a big deal in the book. So, how do we reconcile a boy of 6 with the killing abilities Ender possesses? Unknowingly, Ender commits his first 2 murders before the age of 11. If we were to read a news story with this statement in it, we'd want to have this child killer locked up and treated. In the context of the novel, however, we find ourselves rooting for him. We may not want Ender to lose himself, but we do want him to win. We want him to save the human race from the immediate threat of the buggers and from all future threats. Do we simply allow ourselves to forget that he's only 12 years old when he is given command of the entire international fleet, only to sacrifice many lives in order to commit genocide or xenocide? Even within the text, his actions are so horrific that he's exiled from his own planet. We can allow ourselves to accept and justify the actions of this child by looking to the adult who helped to create him. And in fact, Colonel Graff does face severe punishment for his part in Ender's training and upbringing. But I don't think this is a satisfactory way of dealing with the issue. I think that our ability to accept and empathize with Ender comes down to his need for compassion. Ender tells us that the moment when he truly understands his enemy, understands him well enough to defeat him, then in that very moment he also loves him. The compassion Ender feels in the conflict he has over his own ability to destroy his enemy allows us to accept him as a hero, a child or not. The film adaptation makes a point to emphasize this element of Ender's character, using that particular quotation to begin the show. Presumably, however, the filmmakers did not feel this explicit reminder of Ender's capacity for love and compassion was enough. As such, they cast a teenager in the role of Ender. This was likely done for many reasons, some of which are purely financial and logistical. Others, however, relate to societal norms and public opinion. In the wake of child-killing sprees like the disaster at Sandy Hook Elementary, entertainment industry officials are unwilling to present more depictions of children killing in any way. This is also why the audience, like Ender in the novel, are never told that Ender's human victim, Bonzo, had died. In fact, we see Bonzo alive, though comatose, after the beating, as it would be inappropriate, no matter how compassionate he may be, to actually see a child or teenager kill another. So is Ender a hero at all? He's a child who kills 2 boys in order to stop any future abuse. He's a child who wins battles at any cost. He's a child who unknowingly slaughters an entire race, but then becomes the savior of that race, both physically and culturally, in the book anyway. And he's a child with the responsibilities but not the knowledge of an adult. I think the book leaves us feeling that Ender is a hero because he fought the authority of the overseeing and controlling adults while saving an extraterrestrial race, making him an epic hero who transcends his childhood. I think the film, however, is more skeptical. By the end of the movie, Ender's actions are not glorified, and he's not seen so much as the savior of the race as he has destroyed, but as a teenager hoping, in some small way, to make amends for the harm he has caused. The shock on the faces of the military personnel who have just watched him destroy a planet is real, but not based in disbelief of his tactics, so much as disbelief that anyone would destroy his enemy so completely. From the perspective of the film, Ender is a hero only insofar as he shows us as a society that we must own up to the mistakes that we've made and move forward to reconcile and amend for such mistakes. Ender is therefore a hero of recompense and a warning. Thank you. I'm sorry it was too little literary.
So today I'm going to be talking more about reception. That's really something that I'm quite interested in, is kind of how us as an audience interpret text and looking beyond kind of what's just in the text itself. So I had read the book Ender's Game, I don't know, in high school or something like that, but when I was asked to do a panel or a presentation for this panel, I was far more interested in all the popular press that was going on regarding the film and before it was released back in November. So let's just start with a background, a little bit about the controversy. So Orson Scott Card is the author of Ender's Game, and he isn't a stranger to protest. Arguably, the End Ender's Game boycotts began right when the film was actually being released, dating right back to the San Diego Comic-Con. But in February of 2012, Card was hired to actually write for Superman, and online petitions began boycotting the Superman series, which eventually led to DC deciding to shelve that story written by Card. And a lot had to do with the artist at the time pulling out after hearing Orson Scott Card's views. So if we think to Comic-Con, jump forward to Comic-Con, San Diego Comic-Con, the studio was very conscious about distancing themselves from Orson Scott Card. They didn't invite him to the panel. And that they were also kind of disseminating this message that no, he's not going to be here, and no, the film has nothing to do with Orson Scott Card's personal views. It's about this story of coming of age, etc. So why all the uproar? Just a little bit of background about Orson Scott Card himself. He's a right-wing writer, and he's a very vocal anti-gay activist. So here's just a quick snapshot. He was on the board of directors for the National Organization for Marriage in 2009. I've got a quote up here from him. He says, "Marriage only has one definition, and any government that attempts to change it is my mortal enemy. I will act to destroy that government and bring it down." And he's also on record as saying homosexuality is a reproductive dysfunction born of choice. So, as a result, it's no surprise that boycotts started to spring up online. The most notable was from the organization Geeks Out, who started a petition, Skip Ender's Game. And here's just a screenshot of it. This screenshot's a little outdated. Currently, the petition has garnered over 12,000 signatures. And basically, it kind of spawned this movement of setting up alternative events in major cities on the opening weekend of the film. So the issue here was to ensure that no profits would end up getting to Orson Scott Card in the end, to arguably perpetuate his anti-gay views. So hoping that this kind of boycott would decrease ticket sales. So this boycott and all the attention eventually forced a response from Orson Scott Card himself. He's basically saying he's distancing his stories from his own personal views, saying that the novel was written before gay marriage even became a quote issue, and this kind of came out after Prop 8 was ultimately ruled unconstitutional. So he believed the issue of gay marriage is therefore moot. So anybody, wanting to see the film could go with a clear conscience. So we can already kind of see Orson Scott Card trying to push people like the studio to judge the work based on its own textual merit, rather than the political views of its author. And even the organizers of the boycott kind of acknowledged the same thing. They're kind of saying, well, it's not about the film itself embodying these homophobic views, embodying hate. It's about stopping the profits to Orson Scott Card himself. He has every right to express his own opinions, but he has absolutely no right to our money, is what they say. And I don't know what's going on here. Let's see. I've got a clip from a couple of the organizers, and I hope it plays.
Now here's the thing, is the movie still looks kind of awesome, and I kind of really want to see it really bad. What I'm telling people to do, actually, is to just pirate the crap. You'll be able to find it online, I'm sure, pretty quickly after its release. You could have a viewing party with some of your other cool friends, and hey, maybe even ask for some, complimentary donations, and give them to your local LGBT organization, for youth as well. You can actually create some positive change behind this horrible man's movie.
This is about the stop of money to perpetuate hate speech. That's what these protests and these boycotts and these Skip Ender Game events are all about.
Yeah, I think a lot of people have tried to conflate the issue, saying, oh, you're trying to blacklist Card so he never works again, or, oh, you're trying to... A lot of great directors, a lot of great actors worked on this film. Why are you trying to hurt them as well? And it's like, no, we're not trying to hurt them. It's unfortunate they've thrown in their cast with a bigot, but, they've had their own creative reasons for doing so, and so it isn't about that. It's about stopping money to Card.
And another, strategy that they had said in the larger clip is, you could sneak into Thor, or you could pay for a ticket to Thor, because that also was coming out at the same time, and then sneak into Ender's Game. So just, it's not about not seeing the movie, it's just not getting any money to Orson Scott Card. So the question is, did it work, right? So I've just pulled a few quick numbers. So Ender's Game, approximately the budget for the film was $115 million. In its opening weekend, it got about $27 million, and the worldwide gross as of April, beginning of April of this year, was about $125 million. So arguably it made about $10 million. Just to give you some context, Hunger Games, the first one, on its opening weekend alone, got about $158 million. So it's already surpassed Ender's Game's worldwide gross. And then, as you can see, Hunger Games, the first one, grossed about $408 million. So if you think about it, Ender's Game is the first part of a potential series of films or a franchise of films based on, the opening weekend is kind of the big weekend, the big marker of seeing whether or not this kind of has legs. So based on these numbers, the studio kind of quashed that issue. And arguably, the success of the boycott is kind of reflected here, or at least the controversy, right? So this begs the question, the big question, is it possible to separate the author from his personal views and from the story of Ender's Game? Card and the proponents of the boycott, the studio, everybody seems to think or to maintain that position, you know, that the text exists on its own and doesn't, is not necessarily tied to the views of its author. So to try to answer this question, I kind of looked to a bit of theory myself, and I'm sure, you know, on a Sunday afternoon, everybody wants to hear about theory, but it does kind of enlighten it a bit. And here I've got something from Michel Foucault's seminal essay, What is an Author? And he says, the author is not an indefinite source of significations which fill a work. The author does not precede the work, right? Ultimately, deconstructing the idea of an author as the origin of something original. It's replacing it with the idea that the author is a product of the actual writing of a text. So instead, he proposes that we study a work not through or to understand the work's relationship with the author, but through analyzing the work itself in terms of its form and content. Why, Foucault asked, do we always want to trace the ideas back to specific authors? You know, why when we read a book, do we say, oh, well, this is what Orson Scott Card was thinking? You know, there's this kind of desire amongst the reader to do so. And it's not to say that we should disregard the author, but he kind of draws attention to the importance of studying the space left behind, right? And that is essentially the birth of the audience, right? When we talk about a text, we really have to consider the reception of the text, not just the author. So that brings me to Barthes, and he talks about the power of the reader and the listener, or the audience member, to more or less ignore the work's background and focus more on the work itself, right? So not to listen to all the chatter that's around it, but to kind of focus on that. It's that meaning is constructed through both the text and the context to which the text it manifests itself. So in order to answer the question whether or not the text can be divorced from the author, we have to essentially look at the reader or the audience members. It's the choice of the reader to essentially determine the value of the story. So I've just actually pulled a couple quotes off the internet. The first saying, you know, I suspect those calling Ender's Game homophobic are reading too much into it, right? I mean, even with all the people who are hearing all the controversy and then they pick up the book, do they then find, you know, homophobic allusions, right? And then, in contrast, I have a reviewer of the movie who basically said that when he picked up the book, the homophobic undertones were so disturbing to him that he couldn't actually even finish the book. So we have like two contrasting views, and perhaps we can discuss this when we get to questions. But you know, it's basically some people see those allusions and some people don't. I mean, again, it goes back into the power of the reader. Many people are saying, you know, you're kind of stretching it and attributing, you know, all of the controversy regarding Orson Scott Card's views onto the text itself. So ultimately, I know that's not a really satisfying answer to say, well, can we divorce the text from the author? And ultimately, that's up to the individual reader. But really, that's what it's all about. What it's all about is the kind of agency of the audience, the power in which lies with the readers. And I just have another quote here that I think speaks well to that, is that meaning does not come pre-packaged. It's not controlled by the author. It rather develops from the interaction in which the structures and figures of the text collide with the reader's subjective knowledge, experiences, and expectations. Essentially, that's just saying we all bring different backgrounds, you know, from our personal experience, from the things that we've read, the things that we've been exposed to, and ultimately that's going to color how we read a text and how we interpret the text. So, just to end, Geeks Out after the boycott, because the film was released on November 1st. This kind of came out on their site November 15th, and basically saying that the boycott and the protests were a success, right? If anything, maybe not in terms of, you know, quashing all the profits, as the film still made money, right? but at the end of the day, it's about awareness, right? And we can't minimize the importance of awareness. And I've just circled some interesting lines here. It's that we're ready to be part of the pop culture conversation. We're ready to take that place at the table. Skip Ender's Game was all about us, and it was a success because they certainly got a lot of exposure about it. Now, we must also take this with a grain of salt. This was posted, 2 weeks after the film was released, and essentially, with such an abysmal opening weekend, perhaps it was a bit premature. I haven't really heard much on, how they're feeling about it now, but ultimately what this speaks to is that there is power when it comes to the audience's agency and expressing their views. So that's it for me.
Arrows, or can I hit enter?
I think you can hit the arrows.
Okay, well, hi everyone. I have conveniently persuaded the other two panelists to go first because I knew that the noise next door and the fun will be over. So then you guys can listen to me instead of focusing on the fun these people have. And I can promise you that you will not have that much fun as they did during my presentation. So there you go. Well, thank you for being around today. My presentation today is based on a book chapter I wrote for a collection entitled Ender's Game and Philosophy. For those of you who are interested in science fiction, you're interested in Ender's Game, but you would also like to explore the philosophical dimensions of the novel, I strongly recommend the edited collection. It appeared in 2013 and it was published by Open Court. And the question that I want to discuss, as well as the question that I'm posing during that, or in the context of that book chapter, is the question of power. And I want to ask you whether you think Ender is a powerful individual or a powerless individual. So, powerful? Some people, come on, he managed to destroy an entire species. He was in control of the Earth's army. Powerful? Maybe. Okay. Powerless? Okay. Okie dokie. Well, that's the question. Sorry?
I think both.
I think both. Well, don't go ahead of yourself. That was supposed to be my take, okay? Basically, that's the question I want us to think a little bit about today. Is Ender a powerful character or person or individual or fictional individual? Is he powerless? Or can we think about power in a new way? And that's why we decided to have a bit of an academic feel to our panel, because we thought, a cultural text like Ender's Game is a perfect opportunity for us to start thinking a little bit about the relationship between individuals, power, society, to start becoming a little bit philosophical about the things that we read. So I'm going to ask, is Ender powerful or powerless? I'm also going to ask, what can this science fiction hero teach us about the relationship between the individual, society, and power? To tackle my question, bear with me while I go through a short summary of the plot. I'm sure that you're familiar with it, but I cannot risk it. So Ender's Game is the first in a series of 13 science fiction novels. Ender is the main character. He's a little boy living on Earth, sometimes in the future. Before he was born, Earth had been attacked by an insect alien-like species known as the buggers. Humanity has managed to stop the attack, at least for now, but the political and military leaders of Earth are convinced that the aliens are planning a second yet more deadly attack. And to prepare for this future attack, they set up a special training school, and they send to this special training school children who exhibit extraordinary combat and strategic skills. The children are sent to this special training school and they are trained to use computer simulators to command the Earth's army in this ultimate fight with the aliens. By the time we meet Ender, he becomes the last hope of humanity. There simply isn't enough time to find another leader. He has to be ready in time to defend Earth from the second alien attack. When we first meet Ender, he is a young boy. He's bullied at school by his peers and he's terrorized at home by his older brother. After he is selected to join the special training school, Ender has to resist the bullying in the school and then emerge as an incontestable leader. He ultimately leads the Earth's army to total victory, and he exterminates an alien species once and for all. Now, as I was saying a little bit earlier, I would like us to think about this theoretical question of power. What is this relationship between the individual, society as a whole, and power? Is Ender, this child soldier, a powerful character or a powerless one? Where is his power coming from? Does he own this power? Is it coming from inside him? Is society bestowing this power upon him? What does it mean to have power? Just like my other two panelists, my discussion of power is going to be informed by some social theory. And again, I'm gonna refer to one of the names that has already been mentioned here, the French philosopher Michel Foucault, who's well known for his views on power and the relationship between individuals, power, and society. Power, he argues, is not a thing that we possess. Power, he says, is part and parcel of social relations. It forms the very space within which those social relations can be formed. Power in that sense is everywhere. It's not in the hands of the individual, Ender, it's not in the hands of the institution, but in the very fabric of society. Well, this proposal forces us to think of how relations of power come to shape who we are and who we can become. So today I want us to use the example of Ender and his emergence as a leader to think a little bit about power relations. The way in which power forms who we are and who we can become. Now, Michel Foucault calls this formative power, power that forms us, power that forms the very fabric of society, as well as our desires, our knowledge of ourselves and of the world. Now, when we talk to each other, if we ever talk about power, we usually define power as the freedom to act. We have power when we are free to do whatever we want, basically. For Foucault, power is not something that we have. As I said, power is part of that social fabric. Power is intrinsic to social relations. Power, he says, acts upon us, upon our ideals, values, and even our bodies. I find this really interesting. What does it mean that power acts upon us? What does it mean to the question, is Ender powerful or powerless? If power acts upon us, can we even say, are we powerful or powerless? For Foucault, as I said, power acts upon us. It simultaneously produces us, as well as rests upon a set of taken for granted values and beliefs about human nature and the organization of the social world. These beliefs and these values about how the world is form what Foucault calls a regime of truth. In Ender's world, the regime of truth, so those sets of values and beliefs that are taken for granted, are based on the idea of power as physical strength, what I like to call the power of the fist. Ender's older brother, as well as Ender's colleagues, enjoy terrorizing Ender. They enjoy physically dominating him. To some extent, Ender's world is one based on the idea that the strong dominate the weak, and that only physical retaliation, and thus a demonstration of your own superior physical strength, makes you free. It is this regime of truth that Ender learns as he grows up under the terror caused by his brother and his colleagues. Now, as long as Ender is protected by the teachers and by the school, by the parents, he avoids open conflict. He doesn't need to worry because there is always a bigger shark to swallow the smaller fish, right? Once the authority is gone, however, Ender has to fend for himself. So the regime of truth, this idea that the physical strength matters, appears to leave him no choice. He will either emerge as the strongest one and he will put an end to the attacks, or he will die, or at least he is convinced that this is going to happen. He retaliates, and as we find out later on, he actually kills one of his bullies. Within the logic of the power of the fist, Ender concludes that he has no choice. He has to win this fight for today as well as for tomorrow. That is, he has to preempt all possible attacks on his person. He has to teach the bullies a lesson. This is what Foucault calls punitive power, power that punishes. It is precisely this type of logic that the leaders of Earth actually value in Ender. This is why they select him to become the military leader. For them, Ender is a savior. They reward this logic, the logic of the power of the fist, by making Ender the ultimate commander. Ender does deliver. In the final battle, he falls back upon the regime of truth available to him, and he believes that the only way to ensure that he will win in this fight is to completely annihilate the enemy. So this is precisely what he does, and he blows up the bugger's planet. Now, there is a major omission to my story here. Ender is never told that the final battle is real. In fact, he thinks it's a computer simulation, and he is fighting not the aliens, but the military commanders, the adults, the grown-ups. Ender is fed up with how the training school is treating the children. He feels that he is being used and that he does not have access to the whole truth. He also feels the grown-ups are playing tricks on him and wants to teach them a lesson once and for all, and this is the lesson that he teaches them. He destroys the enemy as part of this computer simulation that turns out to be the ultimate battle. Now, in a controversial book entitled Just and Unjust Wars, an academic by the name of Michael Walzer has described these very same dilemmas facing Ender. Decisions in war, Walzer writes, often appears to their leaders as a matter of necessity. Leaders have to protect the collective, and as such they feel justified in placing collective survival above anything else. Yet, this doesn't mean that a decision like the one that Ender took to destroy an entire species is right or justified. Ender feels he has no choice. The game is rigged, annihilation of the enemy appears to be the only way to survive what he takes to be yet another simulation. Now, can we fault Ender for adopting this regime of truth? The set of values that says the strongest has to survive, and only if you retaliate, only if you demonstrate your superior physical strength will you survive. As a reader, we know that Ender's every action has been monitored and oftentimes instigated by the military commanders. As a reader, we know that the situations in which Ender found himself were actually carefully orchestrated by the military commanders of the training school, quote, to bring Ender to his full potential. Now, these situations, we know as readers, were part of a plan to bring Ender to the point where he would see no alternative to the logic of the power of the fist. In turn, Ender dutifully observed the rules of the game and adjusted. He turned himself into being that military commander that his superiors wanted. He is not happy with what he had become, but he feels he had no choice. So from Ender's perspective, dealing the ultimate blow to the enemy, destroying that alien species, was the most rational thing to do. The only truth, I'm going to use quotation marks, that Ender was able to imagine. He knew that if he will not destroy, he will just have to keep on fighting and keep on being abused. So he is administering the strongest preemptive punishment. Now, this regime of truth that I kept on mentioning and that I call the power of the fist is, I will argue, producing Ender, is shaping Ender, hence this idea of formative power. Ender has learned and recognized to accept this logic as the only possible way of thinking. Ender is thus formed by a form of punitive power. In the process of constructing his own identity, who he is, Ender seems to be a free agent. He seems to make his own choices. He seems to be drawing his own conclusions. Yet in another sense, and us as readers, we get that sense more forcefully, his choices and conclusions are the result of a carefully orchestrated social environment. The end of the novel is enlightening. Upon exterminating the alien species, Ender comes to understand that the regime of truth through which he saw the world was based on a shaky premise. The buggers were not out there to destroy the world. The first attack had been a mistake. Once the buggers realized that humanity was an intelligent species, they were not going to come back. So there was no more deadly second attack. And it is not until this encounter with the aliens that Ender is able to see through the regime of truth that has informed his life. He realizes that under this regime of truth, peace had never been an option. That in dealing with the bullies or the aliens, he had never questioned the idea that he has to deal the ultimate blow. When challenging this regime of truth, Ender discovers that what had appeared to be rational and an inevitable course of action depended on accepting a premise the premise that those who have physical strength are out there to dominate and to kill you. He never questioned whether aliens were out there to kill us. He never questioned whether indeed the bullies were out there to kill him. I mean, granted, they were going to hurt him, but we don't know whether they were actually going to kill him. As long as power is merely an either-or game, win or lose, dominate or be dominated, Ender cannot conceive of any alternatives. And this is precisely how the existing power relations of the society that Ender lives in shape Ender into becoming the person that he turns out to be. Thank you. So do we have some time?
Yeah, it looks like we have about four minutes.
Oh, we have
4 or
5 minutes. Okay, so we have time for some questions. We will ask you to raise your hand, and then there will be a microphone that is going to be brought to you. So if any of you feels that they cannot leave this room without asking a question, then please do so now. Okay, so we have a question up here. First row. Yes.
So, in a social context, if power is not a thing that an individual possesses, but that acts asymmetrically on people, does it make sense to think of power as a form of or as akin to privilege, in a sense that it does act asymmetrically and it is intimately tied to social constructions?
Okay. I am going to answer this question, but Jessica and Angie, do you want to say something?
Go ahead.
Okay. Sorry, the noise is a bit distracting. I think what Foucault would have to say about that, and I'm gonna cleverly use him rather than give you my own perspective, is that when you understand power as part and parcel of the fabric of social relations, it means that there are positions of privilege that do not necessarily belong to an individual. There are spaces of privilege that get to be inhabited by people, and by virtue of inhabiting those positions of privilege, they can have power. But once they are removed from those positions, they don't own that power. I don't know if that makes sense to you.
Yeah, it's more structural.
Absolutely, yeah, thank you. We can chat a little bit more if you want, but in case there are any other questions for the other two panelists. We have a question right there in the back.
First, thank you all for your talks. They were very intriguing. Back to the question of power, I'm wondering if you can comment on I suppose the military's role in Ender's Game, and how, in a way, I get the impression that they're sort of distancing themselves from their power by using Ender and by keeping him in the dark. So,
yeah, I take it that you're absolutely right. Yeah. I didn't really focus on that in my discussion of power, but maybe it connects to what the other participant was asking, those positions of privilege. I mean, the question that we need to ask is, why is it that this idea that the aliens are coming and they are going to wipe out humanity had become such a dominant way of thinking, so that alternatives cannot be imagined? There is no discussion of the possibility of negotiating with the aliens, or, you know, the possibility of peace, or maybe these aliens were not going to come back. None of those options exist, right? But you're absolutely right in the sense that the military does distance itself by bringing in a commander that ultimately gets to be judged, because when the novel ends, Ender is not allowed to go back to Earth. Ender has to undergo a trial. He is found not guilty, but you know, there are some shaky things happening around his trial, and as a result of that, he is exiled. He has to go away, and he can never come back to Earth. So the absolute winner, in a way, is the military, because their name remains preserved. Their reputation is not harmed. They have this particular scapegoat that they can, you know, use, and that scapegoat is Ender. We have a question? No? Okay, well, yeah. Sorry, we have the signs. Thank you so much for being here. If you want to ask us any questions, please feel free to come over here. Thank you.
Sorry, guys.
Can you give me just 1 second? I want to recruit the other panelists, and we need to move out of the room so that.
I'm just wondering if you read another novel.
By
Joe Haldeman, Forever War.
No, I did not read that novel. Is it similar to Ender's Game?
Yeah, it's, Haldeman was a Vietnam vet.
Okay.
So he wrote this after he wrote it in the early 70s.
Okay. How is it called?
The Forever War. Joe Haldeman.
Forever War. Is it a science fiction novel as well, or?
He won the Hugo and the Nebula.
Okay.
So it's in this sort of military empire kind of thing, with the humans against a species that we don't understand after a single event.
Okay.
Earth becomes militarized over the centuries. So I haven't read Ender's Game, but I think
it strikes you as if the two are somehow related.
Ender's Game written?
It was written in, I think, in the end of the 1960s, beginnings of 1970s, if I remember correctly.
Around the same time.
Yeah.
I'm just wondering who. Well, I don't think Haldeman read his, but Haldeman read Starship Troopers.
Okay, but it would make for an interesting comparison. So, thank you. The Forever
War.
Forever War. Okay, thank you.
It's interesting. Earth becomes gay, like all the soldiers become gay, and finally they become clones. So finally they can understand this enemy species, which is, well, I give away.
Yeah, well, that's okay. I mean, even with Ender, he undergoes a certain transformation before he's able to understand the alien. He starts communicating telepathically with the alien. So there is this moment of transformation in order to understand the enemy, to understand the other. Yeah, thank you. I'm going to look into that. Thanks.
Yeah, last one, thank God. I'm just exhausted, you know. Yeah, I teach at the U of C, and I'm a PhD candidate. Communications. Oh, absolutely. I'm right with you.
I'm very definitely, I culturally find myself geoculture and having us so rapidly and predictably attached. But, there's the list.
Have their question heard. And is there 2 or 3 of you guys? Just two this time. They've been through the ring for you, getting the laptop set up.
Yeah. Yep. Do you know what song your name will be? No, I'll have to. I don't have my phone on me. Shoot.
That's fine. Should we hold off before we start letting people in, or?
Yeah, because he's got all the other stuff.
Okay. All right. Now we know what polar bears eat. I'm just gonna ask, what kind of man is attracted to women that eats a donut on a plate? One more time, we're gonna go with the lovely new Ford Mustang. This guy loves driving shots. You gotta use the crap out of the Mustang. You have to put it back in the plate. Okay, we're going to go ahead and start letting in VIPs, and then we'll follow in with regular attendees, okay? Same drill as this morning. I'll check in with you a couple of times before we get started, then I'll do a quick little intro. Pass it over to you guys, okay?
Cool, thank you. Thank you. What's up? What's up? They didn't let my wife on this though.
Oh.
Yeah, a little busier.
Were those people out there that they were waiting for us? That's cool.
It's a bigger crowd this time.
That's good.
Yeah.
Well, unless you're, stage fright or something.
I didn't find that to be the issue. It was just the same issues that we had when we did the practice. I'm gonna be like hardcore on those on the cheat sheet. Just cause as I said, I printed out something this morning for whatever the notes were on the cheat sheet. And yeah, so I'm assuming it's the same thing.
Here, I just numbered it too, so that might make it easier. Unless if you want to use yours, then go ahead, but they're essentially just the same thing.
I do like it numbered. But then again, I can't keep track of which ones are which. I can't keep track of which ones are which.
Well, no. I mean, I just kind of try to keep my finger on whichever one we're at.
Yeah. It's essentially the same thing that I tossed it in. Okay. I don't have my DS either. My wife has it all. My wife has my DS too.
Oh. I wonder why some of them moved and some didn't. Just the sprites. I wonder why some of them were stayed animated and some of them didn't.
I don't know.
to you. But
It was mostly to me. You were fun.
yeah. How many slides do we have on this one?
Since 25.
25. Okay, so by slide 22 or so, we should